everyone and welcome to Joys It Flies. My name's Kirsty and I deal with the sewing side of this channel. So I'm really excited for this tutorial because I'm going to be teaching you how to sew my corset style top. And I must admit this is my favourite thing I've designed so far and my best pattern probably. So I hope you'll like it. Just a couple of notes I want to say before we get going with the tutorial is that yes, you did read the title correctly and this is a free PDF pattern. So that's a good start. Secondly is that just a note on the corset itself. The reason why I put in the title it's a corset style top is because it's not like a traditional corset. So it's not got the boning, it's got the lace up effect at the back like a corset, but it's not like a traditional corset. So it's a bit more beginnerish friendly, as if you could say. And yeah, it does the job of giving you a really nice fit. I mean, you can see from I'm wearing the one I made. So it gives a nice fit. It doesn't cinch in so much as a traditional corset would, but that's fine. So it means the pattern is a bit simpler. Okay, so I think that's everything, but as always, if you have any questions about the pattern, anything you don't understand that I'm talking about, just drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Okay, so here's everything you're going to need. First of all, your fabric. I like to do my corset with two different types of fabric, but you can do anything that you like. So I always generally get 1 meter of each and that does me fine. You're going to need interfacing. Fusible or so on is absolutely fine. Medium to heavyweight would be the best. Then you're also going to need some ribbon. Last time I did my corset I bought 2 meters and that was just perfect. But this time I've got 3 meters just in case. You're also going to need grommets and then just general sewing equipment, so your sewing machine and everything else like that. So to find the PDF pattern, click the first link in the description and that will take you to our website which has the PDF pattern to download. Just download that and then print it off, and you can then sellotape the pieces together and cut it out at your size. But to find out what size you need to cut it out at, you can find 2 size charts to use on the same page that you found the PDF pattern to download. Then go ahead and cut out all of your pieces out of your fabric and interfacing as it says on the paper pattern. And just a quick note, I like to cut out my centre front and my centre back and my ruffle pieces out of my patterned fabric, and then the rest, including the lining, out of my plain fabric. So you can play around and change that up if you like. Then attach your interfacing onto the wrong side of the main pieces. Pin your front side pieces right sides together with your front centre pieces. And this is the only really tricky bit in all this pattern because we're pinning at the moment princess seams, which are basically 2 opposite curves that you're trying to mould together to create that lovely shape around the bust and waist. So just have a fiddle, play around, manoeuvre the fabric and just take your time with it. Once you've pinned both sides, you can then sew them together. Just another important note, every time you sew a seam in this pattern, you're going to want to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, unless I specifically say otherwise. And now a really important step, every time you sew a seam in this pattern, make sure you press it open. This is going to really help later on and give it a really neat look. And also I'd advise for this princess seam, if you have a tailor's ham, use it. It's going to help so much. And if you don't have one, you could either buy one, I highly recommend investing in one, or you could sew one. I have a tutorial on the channel. Now you're going to want to pin your side back pieces right sides together with your front side pieces. These ones are a lot easier, the curve isn't quite so deep. And then sew them together and iron the seams open. And now do the same thing with your last 2 panels, which is the centre back. Pin them right sides together with your side back pieces and then sew them together. And now you have finished the outside of your corset. And all you've got to do now is to repeat all of those steps with your lining. Moving on to the straps, pin 2 of your strap pieces right sides together and then sew all of the way around it, but leave the bottom side open. Then snip the seam allowance just so it lies nice and flat when we turn it right sides out, and turn it right sides out, and then you can iron it flat. And then I like to overstitch all the way around it, and for this I use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Moving back to your main corset pieces, pin your outer piece and your lining right sides together, and you're going to want to make sure that you match up every single seam. That's the first thing I always pin, because it's going to make such a difference to the final product if your seams aren't aligned. And then sew starting down one side, up, and then leave that straight line open because that's for the strap, and then continue sewing around the armhole, around the front, around the second armhole. Once again, leave that straight line open, then continue sewing round and back down the other side. So you're going to want to leave the bottom open and the 2 openings for the straps. Once that's done, you can snip those 2 top corners and then once again snip the seam allowance at any of the deep curves. Coming back now to the straps, you're going to want to push one of the straps in between the 2 layers of the main corset pieces up into those gaps we left when we were sewing. And I like to just bring it all the way up, make sure it's nice and flat, and then pull it back down until it's in line with the rest of the corset. And then repeat with the other strap on the other side, pin them together, then you're going to want to sew across both of them. Now you can turn your entire corset top right sides out, making sure you poke out all of the corners with something like a knitting needle, and make sure especially you get those front curves all pressed out at the front. Then you can just give it a good press with your iron. Moving on to your ruffle, you're going to want to press a double hem of 1/4 of an inch and then another 1/4 of an inch along one of the longest sides. And then you're going to want to iron a single hem of just 1/4 of an inch on either of the shortest sides. And then sew all of those 3 hems closed. Now sew 2 parallel lines along the raw edge with your longest stitch length, and this is to create gathers. So just gently pull your 2 top threads until you have gathers that are the same length as the bottom of your corset, plus about 1/4 of an inch overhanging on either side. Now pin your ruffle to the bottom of your corset right sides together, but fold that extra 1/4 of an inch around the back of the corset. Repeat with the other side and then pin the rest of the ruffle to the corset. Then sew all the way down. Now I just like to finish off that edge with my overlocker just to neaten everything up. But if you don't have an overlocker, you can just sew with a zigzag stitch over the fabric and it will create a similar effect and just neaten everything up. Then fold your ruffle open and give it a nice gentle press. And as you can see, that extra 1/4 of an inch that we folded over before has really neatened up the back and the side of the ruffle and corset. And then just an extra little step I like to do is I like to over sew down my ruffle with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the seam. And then the last sewing part you're going to need to do is to sew 2 parallel lines down the centre back panel. And I like to do my first one 1/8 of an inch from the edge and the second one 1 inch from the first line of stitching. Now you can add your grommets to your corset, and if you look on the paper pattern, you'll see that it marks everywhere where you need to place them, so that on the 2 centre back panels, on the straps and on the front of the corset. And now the final thing to do is to lace up your corset with your ribbon. So make sure you do the back and don't forget to do the 2 ties on the straps. Thank you so much for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I'll see you next time.